The 1964 murder of Kitty Genovese in New York, widely but somewhat inaccurately reported at the time as having been witnessed by 38 bystanders who did nothing to help, launched one of social psychology's most important research programs. The actual finding that emerged was more precise and more useful than the original sensationalized story suggested. The presence of more bystanders can, under specific identifiable conditions, make each individual bystander less likely to help. The bystander effect describes the well-documented social psychological finding that an individual's likelihood of helping in an emergency situation decreases as the number of other bystanders present increases, a counterintuitive pattern given the common assumption that more available potential helpers should logically increase the odds that someone helps. This effect has been replicated across hundreds of studies in laboratory and field settings, encompassing emergencies ranging from a person having a seizure to someone appearing to need medical assistance in a public setting. Latane and Darley's influential cognitive decision model proposes that helping in an emergency requires a bystander to successfully complete 5 sequential decision steps. Noticing that something is happening, correctly interpreting the situation as a genuine emergency requiring action, assuming personal responsibility for helping rather than assuming someone else will, knowing an appropriate way to help, and finally implementing that decision to help. A failure to help can result from a breakdown at any single one of these 5 steps, and the presence of other bystanders can specifically interfere with several of them. Diffusion of responsibility is the primary mechanism identified for the bystander effect, describing how the presence of multiple potential helpers causes each individual to feel a reduced sense of personal responsibility for taking action, since responsibility is psychologically distributed across everyone present. Each bystander implicitly assumes someone else, among the many present, will take charge or has already called for help, resulting in nobody actually acting, a pattern that becomes more pronounced as the number of bystanders increases. Pluralistic ignorance describes a second key mechanism, particularly relevant when an emergency situation is genuinely ambiguous. Bystanders look to other people's reactions to help interpret whether a situation is actually an emergency, but because everyone else is also outwardly trying to appear calm and composed while similarly assessing the situation, the group collectively and mistakenly concludes the situation is not actually serious, even though each individual may privately harbor genuine concern, a phenomenon that can lead an entire group to inaction despite widespread private worry. Structured bystander intervention training programs, now widely implemented on college campuses and in workplace settings, particularly for addressing sexual assault and harassment prevention, explicitly teach Latane and Darley's 5-step decision model, helping participants recognize situational ambiguity, understand and consciously counteract diffusion of responsibility, and practice specific, concrete intervention strategies through role play and rehearsal. Randomized evaluations of these training programs show measurable increases in actual self-reported and observed bystander intervention behavior following training, providing an evidence-based method for translating decades of laboratory research into practical, real-world prevention. One of the most consistently effective and simplest interventions for counteracting the bystander effect is directly assigning responsibility to a specific individual rather than a diffuse group. A person in distress who points directly at one specific bystander and says you, call an ambulance, rather than issuing a general call for help to the crowd, receives assistance far more reliably, since this directly counteracts diffusion of responsibility by making one specific person's responsibility explicit and unambiguous rather than something that can be assumed to belong to someone else. The bystander effect reveals that failures to help in emergencies are rarely explained by callousness or moral failure. They result from specific, well-understood social psychological mechanisms, including diffusion of responsibility and pluralistic ignorance that can affect anyone. Understanding these mechanisms has produced concrete, evidence-based strategies, from training programs to simply pointing at a specific person, that meaningfully increase real-world helping behavior.